So how do you evolve your organisation's talent model in response to that challenge? What new roles do you need to consider? And how do they all fit together? Here to tell us more, please welcome the brilliant Bill Franks, Chief Analytics Officer over at the International Institute for Analytics. Bill, thanks for joining us here this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, lovely to see you. So I know you've got some ideas you're going to be taking us through, Bill, and we'll obviously leave some time at the end for some questions from the audience as well. Just before I hand over to you, a quick question from me, really. It's been a fascinating year for everyone, but not least those in the data space. There's been so many data points to harvest, so much analysis to impart to the business. So before I hand over, what has this year taught you about how demand for data and data analytics services has increased over the course of 2020?
Well, I mean, I don't know of any analytics people that I speak to who have had a lack of things to do this year. They've been ramped up. I mean, to me, this is great news for our whole community in the sense that when times were tough, most companies did not abandon their commitment to analytics. They actually doubled down on it and really have made efforts. Doesn't mean they've always succeeded. Doesn't mean there aren't times where a response is needed so quickly that you just frankly don't have time to do the proper analytics. That's the business reality. But I really saw from almost all the companies I've worked with that they made a concerted effort to really try and remain data and analytics driven even through this crisis, which is, I think, a great sign for the future of all that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. It speaks volumes for the great work that all you folks have been doing as well. Bill, I'm going to hand over to you now. We'll get you to talk through your thoughts and your ideas, and then we will come back for some questions towards the end.
All right, great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bill.
So I think everyone, we're going to have about 10 minutes at the end for some questions, but I want to set the stage first on what do you have to do today to adjust the roles in your organization, your strategy around your people and what skills you're going to need to bring in-house. And I'm going to give you some food for thought. Like I say, we'll have some time at the end. So let's start with a little bit of a history lesson. You know, if you go back and think about it, it's only been about 10 years since the whole era of big data even arrived. And prior to that, things were actually pretty simple. At that point, say in the late 2000s, that was right in the middle of my time at Teradata. We were working with large companies, as were many of the people here, either working with or working for a large company. Things were relatively standardized. Everyone had a data warehouse. Everyone was mostly using SAS and SQL to analyze data. Data models were fairly standard. It was kind of a golden era where I wouldn't say everything was, quote, solved, but certainly people had access to some good stuff. Then everything blew up on us, right? First, it was big data. Now we've got the cloud, open source. And so the number of tools, the number of technologies, the number of architectures has exploded. And with that, the number of skills, not just driven by all of those things I just mentioned, but the breadth of analytics has increased. So what does this mean? It means that the fundamental value proposition of people in this field has totally changed. So, back in the day when I first started, the fact that I could access algorithms because it was only in one or two very technical tools that required custom programming, that was a big value prop. And B, the fact that I had an education that enabled me to guess what models might work best in a given situation was very valuable because it was so expensive to process data that we couldn't afford to do a bunch of iterations that didn't make sense. Well, fast forward to today, these algorithms are ubiquitous. Even the most complex algorithms, the newest deep learning algorithms are available for cheap or free everywhere. So there's no value prop just to say, I can give you access to algorithms. Similarly, this idea that there's a big value prop in me knowing what works best in situations is becoming less true because the reality is there's so many tools today that'll try everything that makes sense and determine what's best. So honestly, today, even if I'm 99% sure I know what's going to work best, the cost to validate that is so cheap, I may as well go ahead and do it. So what we're seeing now is that even people on the ground are moving from having to do their primary focus on custom coding and custom developing things to being more of an architect, more of snapping pieces together, those pieces being both algorithms, sources of data, creating some workflows and again, be more of an architect or a designer of a process rather than a deep coder. But what this leads us to is a couple of interesting facts. One of which is that you've got to totally change what you have in your team portfolio. So if you think about the medical field, 150 years ago, you would have gone to a town doctor, and that town doctor would have given you treatment for virtually anything, whether you had a broken bone, whether you had an infection, whether you had cancer. And, by today's standards, of course, that care wasn't very good. We know that those doctors couldn't be good in all of those things, but the level of the medical knowledge at the time and the medical technology was low enough that you could approximate a pretty good treatment as that doctor, even if there were some others around that would do better in a big city. Today, of course, we would never go to just one doctor to treat all these, because both the knowledge and the technology for medical care has come so far. So today, you've got a generalist, your practitioner, who will triage what you need, but then they have, in these buildings that are all over big cities today, a medical building that has 10 or 20 kinds of specialists. And if my doctor sees me and thinks I have a problem, he may then send me to a cancer specialist, but not just a cancer specialist, a brain cancer specialist. Not just a brain cancer specialist, but a certain type of brain cancer specialist. So the point is, there's people specialized all up and down that chain in the medical field now. And because the level of care is so much higher in those areas, we need them. That's exactly where the analytics and data science organizations are starting to have to go. A generalist, like I grew up being, can't possibly provide analytics that are of the quality required across all of the different methods, all of the different data types, all of the different business problems. You're going to have people that specialize in multiple of those. And as you hire, as you do cross-training, as you have attrition and need to backfill, you need to really be laying out a strategy and filling in your own a building full of different types of specialists, just like the medical field has done. So let's go through a couple of the key roles that have started to pop up in recent times. The first that came out a couple of years ago that's pretty ubiquitous today is that of a data engineer. We had people focused on data for many years. Back in the warehousing days, you had ETL specialists, you had DBAs, and those roles still exist for those platforms. In fact, those people spent much of their time focused on a given platform and optimizing processing within that platform. In my opinion, the reason data engineers have risen as fast, as prominently as they have is partly because of the mess that we ended up in. We end up with all types of platforms, all types of data sources, all these new open source tools in many cases that have to be chained together. Frankly, a lot of what data engineers do is try and figure out, how do I cobble all of these pieces together in a way that's actually going to work, when there may be very little precedent of anyone having done exactly what they need to do before. To the extent someone has, there's only one or two examples. So it's actually really difficult work that takes some highly skilled people. Now, at the end of the day, you end up with, in some cases, kind of Rube Goldberg, things stuck together that managed to work because some smart people made it work. And I don't say that disparagingly. I say that with admiration, because it really is hard to make some of these things work. But like everything, I think we'll start to see some standardization over time. Already there's different parts of the pipelines that are becoming addressed more easily with various tools, et cetera. But one key of a data engineer is that they're more focused, rather than within a platform, they're focused on optimizing across a variety of tools and platforms to make an overall process work. Well, the next few years, we might start to hear the term citizen data engineer, for example, as some of the tools make all that easier. Another big role is analytic translator. This is that role that we've always had someone playing of both on the front end of a project, going between the business problem and an analytical plan, and on the back end of the project, delivering it to the business to take action. Now, I personally hate the term analytic translator. I've also never been able to come up with a better one. But the problem is that term doesn't sound very exciting. And here's the mistake a lot of companies make. They recognize, there are some people who have been doing this and are capable of doing this, but it was never recognized as an official role that's actually critical and important. So we're going to start to recognize it. Maybe not full time initially, but the people that do it, we're going to have part of their job be to do this. But here's the catch. This is not a low-level project manager role. I see companies make that mistake. Well, I'm just going to put some of a project manager type or a low-level person who's pretty smart to do this translation. This should be a pretty senior, highly experienced role. I'd actually love to see director or VPs on either the analytics and data side or on the business side step into these roles, because they understand both sides and can do that translation. This should be some highly paid people, maybe some of your highest paid, because it's so critical. It can't be a tactical role, but it's starting to be recognized. And I do know companies that have people that are really putting a chunk of their time to this, and I think that's going to continue. Another one that's becoming more relevant is what I term an application interface and application developer. And this is another hybrid type role. People are demanding more and more out of a data science process. They don't just simply want to have a score spoon fed into a back end like they used to. They want to interact with these results. They want to simulate what would happen if I made a certain decision. So now we're having to build interfaces, whether within an existing tool like a CRM suite or whether we build some custom web pages. And here's the point. Analytical professionals like myself, we can build a kind of functional, cool looking, shiny app. Those aren't bad, but those aren't professional quality. Just like everything, there's a whole discipline around application design and application development. And what these roles are people that are spanning those two worlds. So someone who knows analytics better than the typical application designer developer, but someone who knows design and development a lot better than the typical data scientist, and they're helping span that. Maybe one of the roles that's come up most recently are these operations roles now. So as we develop more and more with, frankly, some kludgy, held together with tape and wire on the back end things, it's actually hard to keep these things running smoothly in production. So much as has happened with data setters in general with operations roles, we're now seeing roles tied to operations specifically for data science. You hear about machine learning operations, AI operations, et cetera. And again, this is another hybrid role, the very systems heavy understanding, along with the understanding of what these models are trying to do and what parts of the data and analytic flow are most important to tune and keep running. And I think these are going to continue to proliferate. And last, I'll just mention the idea of a chief data scientist, which is a role I wrote about a couple months ago. And this is actually, I think, a role necessary now because of all of this other progress. As most companies now have a chief data officer, chief analytics officer, or both, there's executives now that are tasked with setting the strategy and working the organization. But then you've got a lot of people still having to crank out the work. And as an analytics organization grows, a chief analytics officer, for example, can't get into the weeds on all the projects. So we need somebody to step into that middle. That would be that chief data scientist. This is very much analogous to in an engineering space where they have fellows, engineering fellows. They're not on a management track. They don't want to run a big team, but they're incredibly good. They're some of the most respected and experienced people, and they step in and help the teams actually execute the complicated work. That's what I see as chief data scientist role evolving into, where they're the right-hand person of the chief analytics and chief data officers who can span the gap, a kind of a translator within the team of here's where we got to go. We're going to go figure it out. So as we kind of bring this home, I'll just bring up a graph here for a moment and build out, if you go across the analytics process, all of these roles fit in where it's kind of a two-dimensional grid. We have each stage of the process with multiple types of roles filling it in. You'll notice the analytic generalists on the front end, and then under the performance evaluating analysis, data science specialists. Again, I didn't talk a lot about this here, but these have been around for a while. You've got language processing specialists, AI specialists, risk modeling specialists, et cetera. So you got to think about all of these different areas. So one thing that comes up, and I remember yesterday when I said on one of the sessions, there was a discussion about the democratization of data science, this idea of citizen data scientists. Well, I had someone ask me probably sometime mid last year at a conference I was speaking at, a terrific question. The question went along the lines of, so Bill, you're talking about democratizing data science. I think we'd all agree that democratizing core BI and reporting is safe and doable today, and it makes sense, but isn't democratizing data science maybe a step too far? And what I said to him was that it was a great question, but I thought his premise was a bit flawed for this reason. It is true that today we typically have agreement that basic reporting and BI stuff can be democratized and has been successfully done in many organizations, but that wasn't always the case. If I go back to the early 2000s, late 90s, when the first generations of tools like MicroStrategy and Business Objects, et cetera, were coming out, those tools were not democratizable. They were, in fact, very technical, took a lot of work to make them go, and technical people ruled the day on those. They've just evolved to the point we have amazing tools like those tools that have better functionality, things like Tableau, ClickView, all of these that really help democratize it. So let's go to a cake and cooking analogy. 100 years ago, even if I want to do something as simple as bake a cake, I'd have to go get all the scratch ingredients. I'd have to mix it in the right proportions. I'd have to put it in my maybe coal or wood fired oven that had very little temperature control, and somehow get that cake to come out really nice, fluffy, and tasty. That took skill, even baking a cake. By the time I was little, and still today, we have cake mixes. I can go drop an egg and some water into a batter, put it in my perfectly temperature controlled oven. And honestly, it's hard for me not to have a good cake. That basic level of cooking is totally democratized. Even 5, 10 years ago, if I had suggested we might democratize fancier cooking, people would have said that was crazy. Well, today we have multiple businesses set up around meal kits that parcel out exact measurements of all types of ingredients for a gourmet meal. They ship it to your house with an instruction manual and a video you can go watch. And you can actually make a pretty decent meal at your house, well beyond what you would have been able to create on your own. They've democratized a higher end of cooking. That was only possible through the supply chains becoming more efficient, having our home delivery systems becoming better, the internet to let the videos get posted. A lot of things had to come together. It wasn't possible to democratize that, but now it is. This is where we are with data science. Just like with BI, we now have tools where I can take and build a nice workflow, allow someone to interact with that workflow, maybe rerun and update the scores in a model, all somewhat safely. And if we take advantage of everything today, I think we can do a lot more with data science than we think. However, it does take concerted effort. And so we have to put on some guardrails. The one thing that I find kind of ironic is, for years, analytics and data science people and IT people fought. And I literally, at one point in my career, had servers in a closet down the hall from where my team sat that bypassed IT so we could do what we needed because IT wouldn't give us the permissions. This is classic of everyone from my generation of analytics. We all did this. But we fought and we ended up winning. And now IT organizations typically work very well with analytics and data science. It's understood there's different requirements that require more processing, more data. And if they don't enable it, they're going to find a way. Now I see the analytics and data science people in some cases fighting like crazy to stop others from getting access to some of what we do. And I think it's a matter of degrees. With today's tools, I can build a workflow that's completely encompassed and locked down where you can pick, say, 3 different churn periods, 30, 60, 90 days. You can pick from a set of predefined variables that we've already tested. And you can say, go run me a churn model with that. And if the lift is okay, I could go use those scores. That's not a wide open invitation for that person to build any model of any type with any data. It's allowing them to rebuild a pretty standard model pretty safely that someone's defined. So what we have to do is work on curating the data and the processes we give to these people who are interested in doing more. We have to set up an ability to help them because they're going to need help. And we provide that support as they're building. And then certainly before anything they build actually gets into production or goes broadly, someone who knows what they're doing needs to double check it. But I can tell you one of the biggest complaints over the years I hear from people, both that have worked on my team and that I've consulted with, has been we spend so much of our time doing these boring basic reports that we keep getting inundated with that we can't do the fun stuff. Well, why not give those people more tools to do that on their own? You'll have more time to do the fun stuff. I'm not trying to trivialize how hard it'll be to do everything I just said, but I think we have to loosen up. And then the last thing is, what does keep analytics executives up at night? I'll tell you what, this is something I went through, and I recognize some of the people on this on the event here today, and I think there's even 1 or 2 people out here I've had this conversation with over the years, and it's that in the old days everyone was a generalist. Bringing back to the beginning of the talk, and I might be rusty at some point. But I still could have looked at the code of anyone on my team. I could have dove in and understood the methodology. That's just not true anymore. Any executive of any level today has people on their team, frankly, doing things they have no clue about. It's not possible to understand every aspect of data engineering, every aspect of how to build the interfaces, every aspect of how the operations works, every type of modeling. And that's really disconcerting to analytics executives. And what it requires is us to change our own roles. Those of you, the kind of role attending today, you have to rethink your own role. You can no longer be what I call, the alpha analyst who knows how to do everything on your team's plate and can still step in and do it. I liken it to a drill sergeant, right? What they're famous for is they're making their recruits suffer, but they can sit down and pop out those same 100 push-ups and put them to shame. That's not what we're doing anymore. We have to shift and recognize we have to focus on the strategy. We have to set the direction. We have to then trust the team to do it. And frankly, other disciplines have had to do this for a long, long time. I mean, is there any CEO in the world that really understands everything that everyone across the organization does? Of course not. It would be silly. We have to give that up. And what we have to realize is the requirement for a leader in this space is no longer a technical person who also has leadership skills. It's now for a person with strong leadership skills who also has some technical knowledge. And we have to embrace that and focus on upward strategy, getting the buy-in, getting the budget approved, and trust the teams, as difficult as that can be. So just to wrap up then, a couple key messages for you. Acknowledge all this complexity today. Don't fight it. If you try and fight it, you're only going to lose. Accept that this success is going to require rethinking all of your traditional roles and how people are hired, how they're cross-trained, how they do their daily work. Focus on changing the skills mix within your team, starting with the next hire. Assess what you've got, assess what you need, and then have a plan to adapt that over time. I promise you there'll be even more roles than what I covered today that are going to emerge, right? Look to enable those outside your organization as well. We can't just evolve ourselves without evolving to some degree the business community through citizen data science and commoditization, where we can do it safely. And as a executive, expect that discomfort and even embrace it, that you won't know everything that everybody does, and that's okay, because combined they'll be able to get done a whole lot more than we were ever capable of when we were younger, because of that broader skill set and the broader number of people doing it. So with that, I'll thank all of you for your time today, and I think we've got some time for some questions.
Yeah, great stuff. Many thanks, Bill. Inspiring stuff and so much to dig into. Clearly resonating with our audience here, because we do have lots of questions for you. And I'm going to go straight to our audience and bring some questions up. Folks, if I can ask you to be relatively succinct with your questions, that'd be great. We'll try and get through as many of those in the time remaining as possible. I think first up, we've got Ravi from Data Economy. Ravi, good to see you again.
Hey, good to see you. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Bill, thank you very much. I loved your slide showing the analogies, cake analogies and all, right? That's a beautiful way of presenting. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Thank you.
My question is specific to the CDO role. And we have been seeing the CDO role evolving over the course of the years, right? I think some organizations are adopting CDO or CEO as more of a center of excellence or a strategic role, kind of providing kind of a guidance and strategy. And then we are also seeing the CEO and CDOs kind of directly taking up that ownership of the data assets and directly interacting with the business, delivering the business value. And I want to take your view on what is the prevailing thing, what's going to happen in the industry, what is the success rate, and then either models.
So, what's interesting to me, I'm one who often says about organizational models that it's actually not as important as you think it is in this sense. If you have the right people doing the right things, the way you reorganize the deck chairs will not have near as big an impact as what the strategy had at the front end and the fact that they have the right skill set. So in other words, to have a poorly organized team of really smart people who are doing the right things is going to be more successful than having a theoretically awesome organizational structure with some mediocre people and a poor strategy. So I'm a fan of saying, you know what, I think people in our field are smart. They can figure it out. Get the people in the roles. Do it in whatever way you can politically get buy-in for now. And as they start to actually deliver results and prove themselves, I think it'll become more clear what the long-term solution might be. And I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. Depending on the politics and the standards in certain organizations, some things will make more sense than others. For example, I know there are some large global organizations that have zero precedent and have never supported any type of centralized team. They always want teams, within each business unit, as an example. And so, however much we could argue that a centralized chief data officer role might make sense, literally they've never done anything like that, and you're probably not going to win that battle, at least not out of the gate. So that'd be my advice: is do the right things, and then start to nudge your org chart to move, but don't wait to even begin until you get the right org structure approved.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Bill. And thanks for the question, Ravi. Good to get things underway. Many thanks. I think up next we have Freddie from HSBC. Hi there, Freddie.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Yeah, so I think it was very great. I think I'm also a great analytics professional, and I've spent a lot of time in analytics in my early part of career, now in the business side. So I really feel the value of analytics in business and making any kind of decisions or any kind of investment that we make. My question is more towards the evolution that you talked about, right? Like we initially, when the analytics was more around an offline data. Now it has moved on to some kind of a very real data, and we are making real-time decisions. So how is the evolution has been on that side of the area? I know the customer behavior, or the prospect behavior. How is analytics, according to you, has been able to evolve to catch up?
Well, I think it's, let's say, I would say it's evolving to attempt to catch up because I think so much change is happening. It's still, nobody's on top of all of it. And I think what happens is we do the best we can. So back to even the specialization, I think there's subspecialization in all these roles. So let's just take when you talk about real-time data, take that data engineering role. I don't think all data engineers are the same either. There's data engineers who are really focused on pipelines of mostly live or real-time data for some mostly live or real-time analytics. That's going to require some different things than someone who's focused on maybe a variety of platforms or a variety of type of data that's going to come together to do some of the more traditional models. So I think the key is that you've got to look at the specific type of data and the cadence of data that you need for the analytics that are required, and then you're going to have to adapt your platforms and your analytic processes for those specific needs. I mean, that back to how there's so much out there these days. Even companies that say they're trying to standardize, I see. Some people are using approach 1, some people are using approach 2. Even if you say we're going to move to the cloud, there's 3-4 major cloud vendors still today that all have their own nuances. So you can be on the cloud, I can be on the cloud. There could still be completely other than different clouds. You might be using R, I might be using Python. Someone might be using one pipeline tool, someone might be using another. So I think that's the challenge I'm talking about. Is hardly anyone's up on all of this stuff. And you might have the best data engineering team in the world, and suddenly you have a whole new type of data for a whole new purpose. And you might realize that none of your people actually have experience and skill in doing that. And they're either going to have to pick it up or you're going to have to hire someone in who does have it in order to make it work.
Okay, thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the question, Freddie. Good to see you. I think up next we've got Charles from Shell. Morning, Charles.
Hey, good morning, man.
Hey, Charles. Yeah, there we go.
This is a fantastic topic. So I do have a question and regarding data engineering. So data engineering now is considered undersupply. And normally I treat that one like a 3-2-1. So every data scientist, you need probably 1 or I need 4 or 3. But would you see this is going to be oversupply in the long run? Because all those I like your comments about all the problems because of messy situation. But messy should be under control, especially we can automate it, all those CI/CD pipelines. So what do you see this role is normally I try to coach the staffs. Is that something you want to follow this trend, or do you want to grow the other capability and don't cut into the oversupply when times come? So what's your thoughts about that?
That's a great question. So let me throw out a thought to you that's a little bit contrarian, but also a little bit forward-looking, which is this. I can look back over the years, people were thinking that analysts and data scientists would be an oversupply because all these tools were automating the serving of the data to us and our analysis of that data, and therefore we wouldn't need so many. But what actually happened, the pie of what needed done grew exponentially so that we had so much more to do that all of those efficiencies helped us meet the new goals, but we were still as busy as ever. I think it's going to be a very similar thing with data engineering. If, for example, if we had stuck in the days where everyone had a data warehouse using SAS and SQL, I think we'd have a lot less of a lot of types of people today. A lot would be automated and we wouldn't need as many folks, but it's the explosion of the complexity. So if we were to say we're going to freeze the state of technology, state of data, state of analytics today, I think you're definitely right. A lot of these data engineering, what are challenges today, people will fix. But I think what'll happen is 5 years from now, the data engineers then, they'll be doing something different than what the data engineers are doing today. We don't know what that is yet, but it'll be some type of new data, some type of new business requirement. There'll be some new platforms or tools that come out. And so I think what happens is that we standardize today's stuff, then we have to move on to the next. So as long as we continue to move forward and have things evolve, there will be a need for that skill set. Now, to your point, Will it continue to be as great as it is? Will the disruption be as high as it is today? I don't know. That's a good question. But I don't, for example, I could see the growth slowing, but I don't see a shrinkage wherein a person's job would be at risk, in the next couple of years at least.
Great stuff. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the question, Charles. Much appreciated. Next up, we have Michael from Quantum Metrics. Hi there, Michael.
Hey there. Thanks again, Bill. Amazeballs. That was a great presentation. The question I've got, I want to go back because you mentioned agility and continuous. Meeting shifting consumer expectations or clients or prospects, whatever nomenclature, is a moving target for most teams out there right now that spend literally days, weeks, or months trying to analyze data that may or may not even be representative to build out punch lists. What do we actually need to focus in on, and what do we actually need to improve? So when you mentioned continuous delivery, I think is what you were talking about. Do you think of continuous product design then driven by real-time data rather than the old mainstay of orchestrated journeys, which is a big project, being really kind of pivotal moving forward?
Yeah. First, I'll tell you, I'll thank you for, I've been called many names or had my talks given many terms, both good and bad in the past, but I believe Amazeballs is a new one. So I'll file that one away. But to your question, this is one of these things, I believe so I'm a big fan of doing things in an agile fashion. At the same time, there are initiatives that are bigger that even if you're going agile, you almost have to have different chunks that are independently going agile. So the way I look at it is I like to make sure that people, and I would recommend you make sure that people have enough idea of where they're going, and then you let the smart team go off and sort of figure it out, right? Because even as we're planning these things out, so much is changing so fast. And the one thing I've learned over the years, no matter how well we plan it, something never works like we expect. Either, it could be a technical issue. The system can't process as quickly as we thought. Or, you know what? This data is a little dirtier than we thought. Or, we're not getting a lift from the model, et cetera. So I think the classic total top-down planning doesn't make any sense at all. But I also think you do have to have some type of framework or structure around the way you're innovating. So I kind of use a term I've had in my head of chaotic. I call it chaotic logic. Meaning I know where I got to go and I just kind of try a bunch of things, but I always know what the goal is. And so I can go realize a dead end quickly and move on to the next one. So there's a rational choice with a rational goal, but I'm keeping them in mind as I try things, as opposed to literally just randomly trying things and seeing what sticks. And with that discipline, I think you can really, really make some terrific progress. And this is frankly where I think these translator roles become even more important, because you need those people that are in tune tightly with what those business requirements are, both not just to help define a project, but to help refine the project as it's going and those business needs are changing. If someone's in tune with all that, they can be coming in. Oh, you know what, guys, I know what we were thinking here, but based on what I just heard, it looks like they're going to be changing this, and this next quarter. So in anticipation of that, I suggest you guys think about tweaking this aspect of the process. So I think that's that give and take where those translator roles become even more important when you're trying to do continuous delivery and improvement of processes.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the question and also introducing us to the concept of Amazeballs, Michael. Much appreciated. I think we have time for one final question. I think we've got Corey from AmerisourceBergen. Hi there, Corey.
Hey, guys. Good morning. Bill, it was just over a year ago you kicked off our AmerisourceBergen Annual Analytics Summit, so it's good to see you today, and great topic. One of the roles that we're seeing get focus and attention is the product owner, especially as we think about analytics as a product, not only externally to the company, but also internally, taking that same concept and saying, how do we IT and business work together with a product-centered mindset? Where do you see that falling? I know the business translator, analytic translator feels like that, but are you seeing product owner roles when it really comes to analytics with your customers?
Yes, that's a great question. So when I think so I do know organizations that call everything a product, right? You could argue that even a classic response model that feeds scores in for a marketing campaign could be a quote product if you're managing it ongoing. I see product often used when there's a process that's a little more more core and evolutionarily evolving, like the recommendation engine for a website where literally you're constantly evolving that. I think it's a terrific concept, but this gets back to it. Could an analytic translator possibly fill that role? I mean, possibly. Certainly, they have that span between business and analytics on the one hand. But to me, again, product owner, if you're going to think of a process as a product, there's some different skills they need to be thinking about, which is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of that product. Who are they either marketing or selling it to, or who are the users and how will they use it? And then trying to map in what are the new features or upgrades that I might do. And again, none of that is rocket science that smart people can't do, but there are disciplines in that. There are people who have a lot of experience in that. And I think if you're going to get into having products, you want to think about having at least some people that are involved in that come from a background of product ownership to bring some of the knowledge from that discipline to the others that may be more like a guy like me who's not a traditional product person, but I can learn from them and implement some of the procedures in terms of how do you track the product features and how do you plan out the strategy and so forth. So I think it's another area where we can start to see some good hybridization of skill sets where, again, the data science and analytics is at the center of it all, but there's a whole range of people filling specific slots.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the question, Corey. Much appreciated. Good to see you this morning. Bill, many thanks for getting things underway this morning. A great way to start the content sessions here at the summit on this Thursday. So many thanks for that. Look forward to hearing more from you over the next couple of days.